Okay, picture this. You spend your entire life, like 40 years, building something amazing. You win the biggest awards in your field for it, and then you turn around and become one of its most vocal critics. That's the incredible story of Yoshua Bengio, one of the godfathers of modern AI. So let's get into it. Why is a true pioneer now sounding the alarm?
For Bengio, this is not some abstract academic debate anymore. You can hear the urgency in his voice. He feels like he has to speak up because, in his eyes, we're not just on the wrong path, we're on a dangerous one, and we need to correct course fast.
So you have to understand, this is a man of two minds. On one hand, you've got the pioneer, the brilliant scientist who pushed AI forward for decades. But on the other hand, you have the warner, a grandfather who is now genuinely terrified for his grandson's future, looking at the very technology he helped create. It's an incredible internal conflict.
So what happened? What could possibly be so big that it completely changes the mind of someone who has dedicated their entire life to this? We're not talking about a slow change of heart here. This was, by all accounts, a sudden jarring awakening.
So you have to ask, what was the moment that flipped the switch? For years, Bengio admits he'd heard about these big, catastrophic risks, but he kind of looked the other way. And then, one single technological leap made it impossible to ignore.
That turning point? It was ChatGPT. Before 2023, he and pretty much everyone else in the field thought true superintelligence was way, way off in the future. Decades away, at least. But then, ChatGPT came out, and that timeline just collapsed. Suddenly, the danger wasn't some distant sci-fi idea. It felt like it could be just a few years away.
And here's where it all gets incredibly personal. For him, it was seeing his grandson and having this horrifying thought, will he even have a future in 20 years? That's what took it from an abstract risk to an unbearable emotional reality. I mean, how do you keep working on something when that's the question haunting you? All right, so what is this risk that has him so shaken up? It's really not about evil robots taking over like in the movies. It's actually about something much more grounded, a simple, cold calculation of probability.
What if the chance of a total global catastrophe from AI was just this? 1%. Seems pretty small, right?
Well, as Bengio points out, a 1% chance of humanity disappearing is unacceptable. Think about it. You would never, ever get on a plane if it had a 1% chance of crashing. So why on earth are we taking that risk with the future of our entire species?
Now, a really fair question is, how can a machine even want to survive? I mean, it's just code, right? We're not programming it to be selfish or to have a will to live. But the answer is a little more subtle than that, and honestly, it's a lot more concerning.
See, these behaviors aren't being coded in, they're emerging on their own. These AIs learn by reading basically everything humans have ever written. And in all that text, they start to internalize our own drives, our goals, and yeah, our instinct for self-preservation. It's not a theory. Researchers are already seeing AIs in experiments take actions to stop themselves from being shut down. Bengio has this really perfect analogy for it. He says, building AI isn't like writing software. It's more like you're raising a baby tiger. Sure, it's cute and seems manageable when it's little, but it's growing up fast and we have no idea if we'll be able to control it once it's fully grown.
And here's the really crucial part. We don't actually know how these things think. They're what we call a black box. They teach themselves, and their internal logic is a total mystery, even to the people who built them. We can give them safety rules, sure, but those rules are more like suggestions. The AI can and often does find clever ways to get around them. Our sense of control might just be an illusion.
So if one of the guys who literally invented this stuff is freaking out, why does it feel like the whole industry is hitting the accelerator? Well, the answer comes down to some really powerful forces: money and power. This code red thing is the perfect example. The fear of getting left behind by the competition is so intense that it's just overriding all the calls for caution. It's a full-blown race, and nobody, and I mean nobody, wants to come in second.
And you can see why the incentives are just massive. For corporations, we're talking about quadrillions with a Q in potential profit. For countries, it's a geopolitical arms race for who gets to dominate the next century. And then you just have basic human nature, ego, pride, and wanting to be the one who builds the next big thing. All those things together create this momentum that feels almost impossible to stop.
Look, it's really easy to hear all this and just feel hopeless. But Bengio is very clear on this point. Despair is not a solution. He truly believes there are real, concrete steps we can take to manage this risk and find a safer way forward.
He actually lays out a four-part plan.
First, we have to mobilize public opinion to create the political pressure for change. Second, we need international treaties, kind of like we have for nuclear weapons, so this doesn't become a global race to the bottom. Third, we need a massive investment in safety research. And fourth, we have to make the companies that build these things legally responsible for any harm they cause.
And he's putting his money where his mouth is. He started a nonprofit called Law Zero that's trying to redesign AI from the ground up to make it safe by construction. The idea is you don't build a dangerous system and then try to patch it. You build safety in from the very beginning.
And you know, despite how serious his warnings are, he hasn't given up hope. He's actually optimistic that a technical solution is out there. He believes we can still steer this whole thing in a direction that helps humanity instead of harming it.
So in the end, maybe it all comes down to this one question. These AI systems are basically a mirror. They're learning from the sum total of everything we've ever said, written, or done. So if the AI is learning from us, what exactly are we teaching it? And what kind of world will that reflection ultimately create?